Muppet Show with our very special guest star, Chris Flaherty. Yay! Thank you. Okay, so what better way to end the summer than with a rainbow connection? Bad joke. Tonight's film is the Muppet movie, the first movie that ever featured Jim Henson's Muppet characters, released in June 22nd of 1979, directed by James Frawley, written by Jack Burns and Jerry Jewell, and starring all the Muppet performers like Jim Henson, Frank Oz, Jerry Nelson, and then actors like Charles Durning, Austin Pendleton, and then featuring a whole bunch of cameos of famous people, as the Muppets do. They can't make a Muppet movie without Muppets, so before we talk about the film, I just want to pose the question, what does the word Muppet even mean? It's been a subject of debate for a long time. Some say Jim Henson coined the term by mushing the words marionette and puppet together. Others say Henson just made the word up and he liked the sound of it. And also, if you look up the word Muppet in the dictionary, it also means a stupid person. So there's that. When he was studying at the University of Maryland, Jim Henson created the Muppets for a local TV show called Sam and Friends, which introduced the world to Kermit the Frog. You can see a very crude first version of Kermit in that picture over there. And of course, Kermit would go on to be in Sesame Street. He would be the host of the Muppet Show and essentially be the face of the entire franchise. The success of Sam and Friends gave Henson the opportunity to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show and do commercial work, and then that led Henson to team up with the Children's Television Workshop to create a little show called Sesame Street in 1969. The puppet segments, or should I say the Muppet segments, became such a popular part of the show, their presence was expanded, and Henson could leave commercial work and basically focus on his Muppet work. His continued success would allow him to expand his work even further into more adult content. In 1975, he created a whole batch of new characters for the first season of Saturday Night Live in 1975. That would be Henson's only season with Saturday Night Live, and after that he would go off to England to produce the weekly TV series that we would come to know as The Muppet Show. It premiered on CBS in 1976 and aired until 1981, and featured many celebrity guest stars like Elton John, Julie Andrews, the cast of Star Wars, Vincent Price, Sylvester Stallone, and so on and so forth. And naturally, when you get big on TV, what's the next step? Movies. The first Muppet film is like an origin story of these characters. You'll see in the beginning of the film, little Robin asks Kermit, is this really how the Muppets all came together? And then Kermit says, it's sort of approximately how they all came together. But yeah, it tells the story of how Kermit and the gang came together and essentially their journey to Hollywood to become rich and famous. And it was sort of like an allegory for Jim Henson's own rise to fame. Filming a feature film with these characters would be a bit of a challenge because up until then, the Muppets weren't filmed in the real world. They were filmed on like a sound stage where like the puppets would be raised up and then everybody would be like 6 feet below and like rafters sort of. And so they weren't too sure how these Muppets were going to look out in the real world. If you ever have a chance on YouTube to look up the original camera test, it's pretty funny. They essentially went out with a camera in London and they just took Kermit, Fozzie, and Sweetums and they just messed around in the wilderness. It was pretty funny. So because they're in the real world, like this is the first time you ever saw like not just a Muppet, but a puppet below the waist, for lack of a better term, in TV or film. Like, Jim Henson said like it's a crucial plot point that we see these characters, you know, with their legs moving around and stuff. So how is this achieved? Well, through a lot of crazy stuff. Like basically every shot was a special effect. There's one scene where Kermit and Fozzie are dancing on stage, and basically what they did there was the Muppet performers, they would be wearing like green screen suits and like have the Muppets in front of them, and then they would composite that onto a blank slate of the stage. Kermit rides a bicycle at one point in the movie, and this was really interesting. they attached the puppets' hands and feet to the pedals and handlebar of a bike, and then they had an overhead crane and marionette system out of frame moving the bike along the shot, basically. And as you can see right there, that was used in another Muppet movie. And obviously, a lot of these techniques are still used today by the Muppeteers, even in the most recent one with Jason Segel and Walter. To film the opening scene of Kermit in the swamp singing Rainbow Connection, that took 5 days to do. And how that was achieved was Jim Henson was in a big metal drum underwater. He was under the water, he was under the log, and then he was under Kermit. And then he had a mic on in there, and he had a tube for breathing, and then he basically had a sleeve coming out of the drum so he could operate Kermit. And then there were 2 other puppeteers on the outside of the log operating Kermit. So it's a very extraneous process for just one scene in the movie. The craziest thing I think they ever did was how they filmed the car scenes. Essentially, the Muppeteers were lying on the floor of the car, and they had monitors on the ground. So they're like doing this, and they're watching the monitor to see what they're doing. And then you're going to say, who's driving? They had a little person in basically the trunk of the car with a remote control and a monitor driving the car. And apparently one time the little person's monitor went out. So the assistant director's on a walkie-talkie going, okay, go left, turn. This just sounds like a bad action movie, like the Muppets version of Speed with Keanu Reeves. At the end of the movie, spoilers, Animal gets giant. Jim Henson didn't want to do like a miniature set and just use the regular animal. He wanted a giant animal puppet, and they built a 60-foot animal Muppet, which you'll see. And the final shot of the film, which is the big finale number where they all sing Rainbow Connection, features over 250 Muppets. I have no idea where they got all those people to perform all those Muppets. Apparently John Landis and Tim Burton were 2 of the Muppeteers in that shot. I do want to talk a little bit about the director, James Frawley. He mostly worked in television, like with The Monkees and That Girl, and some of his more recent work would be like Ally McBeal or Grey's Anatomy. He's recounted his time working on the film as almost a fun challenge because every shot was like a special effect. But then we have a contrasting story from Austin Pendleton, who plays Max, who said that it was a very unhappy set and that Frawley didn't really get along with the Muppeteers. And he said he sort of like contributes that to the fact like Frawley was an outside source. Like they had a set like a troupe of Muppet players and stuff, and so he was an outsider, and I guess his vision and the Muppeteers' vision constantly clashed. Can you imagine working on a Muppet set and it not being happy? But after that, they never hired someone outside of the Muppet Workshop to direct a Muppet film. It was always either Jim Henson or Frank Oz. And then I don't think until 1999 with Muppets from Space, they hired an outsider. The Muppet movie currently holds an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes and would gross over $65 million at the box office, and is still the second highest grossing Muppet film behind 2011's The Muppets. It would be nominated for 2 Oscars that year, Best Score and Best Song. The success of the film would lead Jim Henson to shut down production of the television show and focus more on the films. There have been 8 Muppet feature films in total, and I really hope there's a 9th one soon. Henson's success would allow him to create other projects, like the show Fraggle Rock for HBO, and then films like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. Frank Oz would also lend his Muppeteering talents to help bring a certain Jedi Master to life in the Star Wars film Empire Strikes Back. That's correct, Yoda. And then obviously the Muppets have continued to thrive throughout history, from cartoons like the Muppet Babies, multiple TV specials and direct-to-video movies, Disney World attractions like Muppet Vision 3D, a music video with CeeLo Green, commercials for Pizza Hut, Ice-T, Toyota. They returned briefly to TV in 2015, and that series was basically like The Office, a behind-the-scenes documentary of them producing a late-night TV show. and it was unjustly canceled after 1 year. Anyway, in the great circle of life, the Muppets have always risen in popularity. They go away for a while, and then they make a big comeback. And right now, I think we're in that second stage where they're kind of just not too popular right now. They're there. So I think that means we're due for a big Muppet comeback, and I'm very excited for that someday. But for now, we just have the classic Muppets. And to bring it on home like I always do, here's a young me outside Muppet Vision 3D at Disney's Hollywood Studios, or as it was called back then, Disney's MGM Studios.